Welcome back to The Rebel's Edge. I'm John Najarian. Pete Najarian will be joining me shortly, and we're going to cover why Bitcoin is up another $4,000 today. Here's a hint. It's a day that ends in day. More on The Rebel's Edge. Bang.
There it is. I'll tell you what, it was a great trip we were on, John, but it's also nice to have your feet back on land too. What a great last week that was, man, phenomenal.
Yeah, well, how about, Pete, how long did it take you to get your land legs back? Because even though it's a big ship, folks, I mean, you do get a little bit of this and this.
I'll tell you what, those first couple days, man, there was some pretty hellacious, not that bad, I guess, but rolling. That rolling, man, you kept thinking to yourself, have I had too many tequila? Wait, I haven't had any tequila. What the hell is this? But it was great.
It was. That was for the Grant Cardone Foundation, folks, and it was fantastic. I'll have to get a total from them pretty soon, Pete, because I know it was over $6 million that they raised for the kids, for his Cardone kids, as it were. But I don't remember how high it went above that, but it was pretty crazy. And it was very, very fun. And again, hats off to everybody who participated, who gave, and just going on the cruise basically raised, let's see, 3 million just by the people paying for their donation to go on the cruise, Pete. So yeah. Pretty interesting. Yeah. All right, let's dive into some macro minute stuff, Pete. I'm going to kick it off today by saying, no surprise, Wednesday at 2:30 is what I'm waiting for. Now, that's 2 days hence, of course, but that will be when Fed Chair Jerome Powell has a press conference, because it's already as close to a certainty as it could be that we're going to get a 25 basis point cut. What do you say?
Yeah, you're dead balls on that one, John. I mean, 99.1%. I don't think it gets much higher than that. I've never seen it actually say 100 until it's done. But so yeah, that's what we're expecting. January, they're looking at about 84% of a pause still, John. So that's something I think that maybe we'll get a little something from Powell as he looks ahead as well. But I think I already know his answer. We will be data dependent, which he's been very transparent on for a really long time. Just a month ago, that pause was at about a 54%. So it has jumped up dramatically. I would expect a pause knowing what we know now. But again, we're still waiting on all of the different data, which we got last week for this one. We got enough data that number just started going higher and higher and higher. And here we are, John. They will be cutting for a quarter, but it is all about the commentary afterwards as well.
Yeah, well, Pete, I bet you can't guess what we're going to cover on Fantastic Futures. Bitcoin. Bitcoin, oh my gosh, folks, got that close to $107,000 per coin. So far today, Pete, they've only traded 81 billion Bitcoins.
Is that all?
Just back and forth, just volume, nothing to be concerned about. Right. It's just the volume numbers there are incredible. And because it's trading over 106,000, almost 107, that's my fantastic future.
I think that is fantastic. I knew you were going to be doing that today. So I thought, you know what? I'd love to piggyback, but I've already piggybacked on the Fed. So I'm going to go somewhere else. And it's just volatility that we're seeing, John, despite the fact that the markets themselves, and people always will say, well, when the markets go down, that vol goes up. Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. But it's going up even despite the fact that the NASDAQ is going up pretty substantially. And we're seeing a little bit of movement here and there. It's been up, it's been down, it's been close to flat for the Dow. But John, I think that's pretty important. About a 2 to 3% move on the VIX today. It's over 14. We'll keep an eye on that one. I don't expect it to go too much further than it is right now. But I do look also at the oil volatility index, and you and I have been talking more and more about that, the OVX. That's a CBOE product, and it's it's phenomenal. I mean, a week ago it was trading 26. It jumped as high as 36 as just this past week and into today. And year to date, the high is 52. Keep an eye on that, folks, because I know that oil feels like it's just basically stopped at, call it 69.70. But that is something I think we need to keep a close eye on, because that volatility is pretty important as well.
Yep. Volatility is both uncertainty, folks, and movement of that particular asset. In this case, like Pete said, OVX tracking crude oil. All right, Pete, let's give another shout out to our good friends at Atom Beam, because Atom Beam, folks, thanks to many of you who are watching right now, many of you have helped fund this crowdfunding for Atom Beam. And you did it by either scanning that code or going to invest.atombeamtech.com. And Atom Beam, basically, it packetizes this data that goes into data centers so that the stream is not nearly as big, which means that the demand for energy consumption by that data center for anything sent to the data center by Atom Beam is much less, as much as 75% less. And you've heard us say many times that the data center demand for electricity for AI is about 8 to 15 times, depending on which, whether we're talking about Grok or whether we're talking about ChatGPT, whatever. It's a significant higher energy demand than a regular search, because of what's available to AI, artificial intelligence. So Atom Beam helps solve that problem. And you can still invest until Wednesday, same day as the Fed meeting. Then this round will expire. So if you want to invest in a pretty compelling technology, and like I say, you guys helped it raise $2 million just last week alone. Well, go to invest.atombeamtech, that's tech.com, and you could be part of this. It's a pretty interesting story, and I know we'll hear a lot more about it in 2025 and as it goes into the public markets very, very soon. So that's Atom Beam, folks. Now let's dive into Viridian Therapeutics, Pete, because the stock was up 17%, 20%, 25%, just exploding to the upside. This biotech company, big win in thyroid eye disease, a condition that causes eyes to swell. You can imagine that that's not terribly attractive and perhaps potentially pretty dangerous. Well, these guys, they did a study, and after 15 weeks, 56% of the patients saw an improvement. That's pretty amazing. And that's pretty amazing about the stock as well, because if you see a big stock like this one moving 26, 27%, that's pretty amazing, Pete.
It is amazing. Part of that movement, John, again, we talk about it all the time, but it's just something that has to be said, which is, what is the short interest in this one? Well, it's about 12%. I think those guys are feeling a pretty ugly squeeze today because of these numbers that they were able to put up. As you said, 56% improvement. And the other thing is, this goes right after Amgen. Now, Amgen's got their own product, and Viridian has done a magnificent job. And basically what they were telling us, John, is the improvement that they were seeing was dramatic versus the placebo in just about everything that they were testing. So when you see something like that and you're going up against the big boys, they don't have a very deep, in this case, Viridian, not very deep in terms of the pipeline, but they are at phase 3, and that is getting closer and closer to getting to exactly where they want to get. And I'll tell you what, they do not have a problem with the balance sheet. That is solid. They do have some burn like anybody would, but this is a name that I think people need to keep track of, because if things go well and they get past the next level, this is a stock that I think could break through that 52-week high that I think is right around 27. It gets through there, it could get up a lot higher than that, because this is a really important drug.
It is. You can imagine, folks, if your eyes were swelling, how that would make you feel and how it would make you look.
Yep.
So pretty important stuff from Viridian. All right, Pete, MicroStrategy. There's hardly a day that goes by, like I said, at the cold open, where Bitcoin's not up. And if Bitcoin's up, well, MicroStrategy's up. How come? Because they own over 350,000 Bitcoins. That's why. Pete, they bought another $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin last week. And the NASDAQ had some pretty interesting things to say about how they're going to be included in the NASDAQ 100. So that was big news that also helped drive this stock today. It's already traded 16 million shares, Pete. And, you know, that's a full day's volume in just the first 3 hours. Pretty impressive.
Pretty impressive. Michael Saylor is absolutely amazing. His commitment to what he's doing is absolutely amazing as well, John. I mean, like you said, and as a matter of fact, I used this last week. I'll use it again. He owns more than 2% of all the Bitcoin in the world. So when I say he, MicroStrategy does, this is unbelievable what they've been able to accomplish. And yet the stock's not actually at its all-time highs. It's significantly off of that, which was 543. But I would say this, John, how about if I told you the stock is up 540% year to date? That's not so bad. And a lot of that, almost all of that, is credited to the fact of what they are doing, what the investment has been by Michael Saylor. And he just keeps doing it. Like you said, I think he just added, what did you say? I think it's $1.5 billion more in Bitcoin. So the numbers are staggering. He continues to be a major force here. And yet they've got their own company too, which is an AI-powered software. So everything seems to be going in the right direction. And I'll tell you, if Bitcoin goes anywhere near where I know you have talked about, John, I think you've used numbers like maybe 150,000 or something like that, maybe even higher than that in the not too distant future. I would say this stock has plenty of fuel that would get in there behind it and push this stock even higher.
Yep. Wherever Michael Saylor is today, probably right around Miami. That's where he hangs a lot, Pete. He's a pretty happy camper, as are the shareholders of MSTR.
Yeah.
All right. Capri Holdings, Pete. So these guys are up pretty good today, but they were down on their butt. And why? Well, because they couldn't complete the deal with Tapestry, which is the company that, you know, Coach and all those different brands are under. These guys, Capri, the reason they're up today is not because that deal was blocked due to antitrust concerns, but that happened a long time ago. That would have priced this thing significantly higher. And if you guys look at where this one's been, CPRI, you'll see that it had been up there closer to that takeout price, which was give or take 56, Pete. Today, after a 7% rally, it's almost 23.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, John, what they've been able to accomplish. Unfortunately, they've had so many ups and then so many downs with Capri. It's pretty amazing. But today, obviously, a nice big move to the upside, 7% or something like that. They, again, also have pretty significant shorts. This is a really interesting one. And what my biggest takeaway was not about Capri, John, but it was a little bit more looking at, hey, look, I continue to pound the table on the financials. And why is that? Because of the investment banking side of it. Well, Barclays is somebody who's a part of this deal that Capri is going with right now. So I think, once again, my takeaway is a little less on Capri just because of the volatility that they've got there, and a little bit more towards Barclays because this is going to be another feather in their cap, I think, when this is all said and done.
Well, the Versace brands and also Jimmy Choo are the two brands that Women's Wear Daily said, hey, they're going to have an auction process through, exactly as Pete said, Barclays. And hopefully it raises them billions of dollars, Pete. If it doesn't, I imagine they won't do it. But maybe they overpaid for some of these brands. And even though they thought they could do this deal with Tapestry to sort of put a whole bunch more brands under one umbrella, it seems Justice Department or Federal Trade Commission or somebody didn't want that to happen. So they gave it the Heisman, basically, Pete. By the way, speaking of the Heisman, that was pretty great for Travis Hunter this weekend. I know we're not on sports yet, Pete, but that kid is pretty phenomenal.
He's phenomenal. He's phenomenal, and he was absolutely the guy, I think, for most of the season that sat at the very top. and he actually came through. So kudos to him for being a two-way player in a world that doesn't really show too many two-way players anymore, John. I don't think he will be at the next level, and I talked about that on our radio show yesterday. But I will say, as an athlete, this guy was well-deserving.
Yep, I agree. And Ginty, likewise, very deserving. Yep. But only one can get the trophy. Let's just, for a second, Pete, refresh people's memories on Capri, because that Jimmy Choo and the sale, potentially, according to Women's Wear Daily, of Versace as well, we have unusual activity today. People are betting that it goes higher. It's basically right where the stock's trading now, $23, call it. And they're buying those December 27th expiring. So not this week, but the following week, not the 20th, but the 27th expiring calls. And that'll be interesting. They paid about $1 for that shot, and they have, just under 2 weeks for that to pay off for them.
Yep.
Let's hit one more, Pete. Micron Tech, the stock that you used to be the specialist in on the CBOE when it used to be called that. Now it's CBOE Global Markets. But Micron Tech, they're getting a $6 billion boost from the Commerce Department. That's a pretty big deal. And the fact that they're going to put up, I think, some pretty interesting commentary about how AI is driving the demand for their chips, I think also very interesting today.
And sometimes, John, I think these people, a lot of people don't really understand how Micron is actually involved in this in a much bigger way than maybe they know already. And like you just said, the government subsidy, $6 billion, that isn't just chump change. That's pretty nice. And job creation. That's why the government is a part of this thing. They're looking at the job creation of potentially over 20,000. So those are all big numbers. Micron today, nice move to the upside, 6% move to the upside. It's still nowhere near the highs, John, the 52-week highs of 157. But I will tell you this is one of those names that it's kind of sneaky, because people forget about this name, kind of like they forgot about Broadcom for a really long period of time until last week and now again today. And that stock is just ripping to the upside. But I look at the PE, the price to earnings right now for Micron, and I'm looking at almost single digits, John. We're looking at 11 for a PE, the forward PE of Micron. So fairly inexpensive. I think they're in all the right areas for them as far as the different places that need the chips that they're producing. I think Micron is really sitting in a great spot, and I think it's pretty inexpensive still sitting here right now at about 108. So a name to keep a very close eye on, and I know we do all the time, looking for that UOA, that unusual option activity, to kind of direct us on when is a good time to invest here. But I'll tell you, Micron certainly is in a good spot now today because of what the government's doing as well.
Yeah, it's, and you'd mentioned, Pete, I think Marvell and Broadcom also just on fire. So definitely very interesting stuff happening in certain areas of tech. All right, let's take a look, Pete, at one of your favorites, which is Dan Campbell. We're not going to listen to Dan this time, not in the locker room, but we are going to see one of the great games of this year. Now, Pete and I are both defensive players, so we'll say they didn't play a lot of defense in this one, Pete.
Yeah.
Anytime without an overtime that you score this many points, it's really an offensive display, not a defensive display. But let's give it a listen, shall we?
Yeah.
Detroit Lions just got Buffalo fucked by the Bills. Holy shit. Give Josh Daddy Allen the MVP. The great white hope just completely fucking lobotomized the Lions secondary. Motherfucker threw for about 8 miles in Detroit. Pookie had Dan Campbell's defense on a fucking dog leash and walked them up and down Ford Field all afternoon, while James Cook proceeded to dig down Detroit's interior for 7.5 yards of fucking carry. The Lions dreaded seeing Bro get the ball so much that they tried to pull one of his off. This was
people.
honestly the
Sorry
least
about that,
entertaining
but this was a
80.1
great
score game you'll
This
ever
was-
fucking watch. Bills versus Lions ending 48-42 with a drunk
And
1,000
Josh
yards of
Allen
offense
is-
sounds great, but this shit was over by the second quarter. Oh, fuck, never mind. As I'm writing this, the Lions might have just recovered the onside kick. Okay, they didn't recover. My point stands. After this game and Lord Mahomo's injury, the Bills are the new favorites to win the Super Bowl on Poly Market. Too bad Carson Wentz is about to turn back the clock to his 2017 self and bullshit the Chiefs to a 3-peat. If you want quick NFL recaps like this every week, fucking follow me at Poly Market Sports right now, Pookie.
Well, he's colorful.
Poly
There's
Market.
no doubt about that.
A lot
I
of you knew
apologize.
about Polymarket because of the election betting and so forth. But wow, he dropped a lot of F-bombs in that one, Pete.
He did. He's colorful. Hopefully, people, if you're offended, sorry. It's not, but he's fun. You know, he's having fun. He's not, you know, it's all up to how you want to interpret it. He was right about a lot of things in there, John, and then going back and forth between being right and wrong and everything. But entertainment, for sure, because that game, if you're an offense, and everybody does love offense, you and I are defensive guys. We love to see defense, but let's be honest. Fans, 99% want to see scoring. Well, when you get a game like that where it's 48-42 or whatever, that's what most fans are really looking for. That was an awesome game. I watched almost the entire thing. Thought it was pretty fun to watch, even though I'm a defensive guy, just because to see two MVP quarterbacks potentially going right at it head to head, that's a lot of fun. And nobody ever sleeps on Dan Campbell. He's the best, man. That guy's outstanding. All right, John, let's jump to some sports. And one of them is a sport that I've been critical of for a really long time. I think you and I have always agreed, but I've been so angry about it because I sit here in Minnesota and I watch a group of guys for the Timberwolves who all play basketball. They don't take any load management. Anyway, that being said, I wanted to point out that the NBA ratings are now 28% lower this year than they have been. Here's an even better stat, John. Since 2012, the ratings are down 48% in the NBA. You don't see those numbers in NCAA football, NCAA basketball, the NFL, none of that. But Disney still did give them a huge payday that I got to give kudos to Adam Silver. Past that, I got no kudos to give that guy at all, John. He has allowed this to happen where they do have load management. Hell, the guy even came out with certain rules about load management. I mean, that's how crazy this is. So I see what's happening here. They got a great new contract with ESPN. That part's fantastic, but nobody's watching. And if I'm ESPN, I'm sitting there looking at the guys who put this deal out there and said, you're fired, you're fired, you're fired, because this is outrageous how bad it is. And John, they're trying everything. They've got this tournament within the NBA that these guys play, and nobody cares. They paint these floors that look ridiculous. It's not the hardwoods of yesteryear. And I'm not some huge throwback, but you know what? A lot of these, when you watch the games, it's distracting as hell because it just looks awful on TV to watch what the hardwood looks like now, all painted up and everything. But what do you think? Am I way too harsh on Adam Silver? Because I feel like he deserves so much criticism. I know certain things are going well, but at some point, this whole thing is going to stop and be done.
Well, that's the worry, Pete, because like you said, load management, that just means players are sitting down. Some players don't want to play 2 games even back to back.
Right.
So you got that. Second part is the shooting style. A lot of people really loved Michael Jordan and the Phi Slamma Jamma and all that stuff. Now you're getting 3-point shooters, from halfway down the court. Now that takes a lot of skill. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Steph Curry and these guys that can drop threes, just rain them in. That's interesting. But a lot of people really were in love with the slams, and they're not getting as many because of the threes, obviously, because you get more points for a 3-point shooter. Also, the league's been very left. Adam Silver's left. I think the league is left. And I think a lot of fans are just like they turned away from the left in the election, not happy about this with the NBA, Pete. And lastly, I'd say even though they overpaid like crazy, because it's not just ESPN, but the people that carry the game, and ESPN carries the bulk of them, paid $76 billion. And some people might say, wow, that's just crazy. And it is. But consider this. When you're in the film division of Disney or any of these others, Universal, whatever, when you're putting out a Fast and Furious, or you're even putting out an animated film that's doing really well, like Moana 2, Pete, it's killing. It's still doing really well. Even though the numbers were down on the second week of it, they did very well with that movie. You know how much it costs to get one of those movies out there, between making the movie, paying the stars, and getting only 40 or 50% of the gate because the theater gets the rest? Cost you about $500 million to get these movies out there. So you can see that if you paid $76 billion for the NBA for however many seasons of it, you compare that to the amount you have to put out for a movie that might be a total dog, because there are several, we can cover that tomorrow. There are several big dogs out there that are losing a couple $100 billion, not billion, but a couple $100 million. You get the idea that sports is still where you want your money, but that doesn't mean that they didn't overpay, because they did.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. They did. And I'll tell you what, at some point, this is going to run out, and it's not going to be pretty. All right, next up, John, we've got the NFL, and we got Monday Night Football. We got the Minnesota Vikings against the Bears. Now, why is this even interesting? I'll tell you why it's interesting. The Chicago Bears, for all the criticism that they've gotten, John, and obviously they've got a lot of coaching things going on there. They got certain players going on, a lot of different things going on. They are still they are willing to go out there and play the game like it's supposed to be played. And I'll tell you, their record doesn't look great, but they are playing some games that are very competitive. And not that that's getting you anywhere, but I think it just says a lot about the Chicago Bears. And the Minnesota Vikings now have an opportunity in front of them because of the Lions losing yesterday to the Bills. Now all of a sudden the Vikings are sitting there. And by the way, the Minnesota Vikings are the Rodney Dangerfield of football. And I say that because they get no respect. John, this is an 11-2 team that has dominated the entire year. They lost the 2 games that they lost. They lost them 2 in a row, and then they bounced right back. But Sam Darnold has been, and I'm the first to say, I was wrong on him. I thought this guy was a hack. I thought he was a guy that was overrated. He was like the 3rd or 4th pick in the entire draft. He'd done nothing in his career anywhere, and he's been a lot of places. But he came to the right place. And why do I say that? Well, he's got an all-pro tight end in Hawkinson. He's got basically the best receiver in the league in Justin Jefferson, for sure. He's got Addison, who was the Bolitnikoff Award winner when he was in college. And then you've got Naylor, who went in the draft in front of JJ. So I would say he's sitting there with a great group of guys, and maybe, just maybe, he's pretty good player himself. In the last 6 games, John, that he's played, they've won the last six in a row, 11 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Not so bad. And he just keeps lighting it up more and more and more each and every week. Now, the other guy that I'm impressed with, though, is your guy, Caleb Williams. I mean, it's interesting to watch a guy like this who's getting no credit now. Everybody's saying, well, he's kind of a bust and everything. Caleb Williams is not a bust. How about this, John? The last 10 games, he's got 14 touchdowns and 1 interception. He's only got 5 interceptions on the year, and that happened in the first 3 weeks in 2 of the games where he had 2 interceptions in each. He had 4 interceptions there. This kid is actually playing really, really well, and it's why when the Vikings played them just a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago in Chicago, the Vikings won in overtime. So this is a game that's kind of a game where Chicago's like, hey, look, we want to bring a little something, show a little something. And I think Caleb Williams, he went up against the Vikings defense and didn't even flinch. So tonight's game, I think, is going to be worth watching. And hopefully it's a nice close game. I think it will be, but you never know. Things can happen, but this should be a really fun game.
It should be. And, like you said, they had Washington beat, Pete, and then their defensive backs started, either as he says, celebrating with the fans, or it didn't look like that to me. It looked more like he was basically flipping off the Washington fans and not keeping his head in the game. And then they got beat for a touchdown on a Hail Mary. There have been a couple games like that, and a couple games where, the kicker, Santos, I think it is, Pete, he's 36 for 36 inside the 40 or something like that. It's amazing. And Eberflus didn't even put him in position to kick it at the, against in the Thanksgiving game. So yeah, I think you're right. It's a lot more coaching than it is players when you come down to that. And you put a couple of those losses, couple of those L's up as W's, and they're in the thick of it. They're not going to win the division, but they're in the thick of it. And that's coaching. And I hope that the Bears finally get a decent coach. I was kind of hoping, Pete, they might have got Belichick, but then he decided to go out where there are college cheerleaders instead of pro cheerleaders. And
I'll say this about Belichick, John. The one thing that I give him credit for is a lot of people are standing back behind, and we talked about this yesterday on our radio show here in Minnesota. And I was saying, basically college football has turned into pro football. Let's be honest. I mean, you've got free agency. They just call it the portal. You've got NIL. That's salaries. And these salaries are going like this, up, 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 and away. Because I'll tell you what, a guy like Bill Belichick goes to North Carolina. I wonder what their NIL has jumped. I'll bet you it will double, John. They will probably be very close to $20 million or more. And all of it is because Bill Belichick is coming. He's a guy who understands young players because of all the drafts that he's had to do. But now young players are actually in college, obviously, but they are playing like they're pros. They got their free agency. They get their pay. They don't have to worry as much about this, that, and the other. And I think he's got a handle on that. And he's bringing in basically the staff at New England that he had, the general manager and everybody else. He's bringing down there to North Carolina. You know what the North Carolina GM is going to get paid? $1.5 million. And he's getting paid $10 million per year. So they have opened up the piggy banks down there at North Carolina for Belichick.
Yeah, well, you quoted his record with and without Brady last week, Pete. Yep. But still, he's not going to have Brady, but he is going to have many of the pieces of what could be building a great football team again in North Carolina. All right. Thanks for joining us, folks. We will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure you check out. We try to keep that QR code on the screen for you so you guys can scan that and join us in Vegas, March 22nd. So please do that. Check it out. And we'll see you tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern Time.